morning, everyone. So how many of you can guess which movie Hal was from? Which? Yeah. So we all grew up watching movies like Space Odyssey and Skynet from Terminator, really grew up watching these Hollywood movies. But now AI has come out of Hollywood and university labs to real life. So over the next 15 minutes, I'll talk about three things. One, I'll talk about evolution of AI over the last 18 months. It's been a dramatic change. And second, what we observe is a lot of the disruption in AI is happening because of thousands of startups building very interesting products. And we have a view on how do you need to analyze the startups is very, very different from how you would study a traditional competitor. So we'll talk about that. And also show you some results of using our new framework, what we call as a swarm disruption model, to understand the trends in the AI startup. And what are some of the key questions we can answer using the new model, what we have built. So that's really what I'm going to focus on over the next 15 minutes. First, quickly on the evolution of AI. Just in the last 18 months, you have seen dramatic change in terms of how AI has evolved, largely because of 4 reasons. The computing power has dramatically increased. The cost of computing has dramatically reduced. That's huge. The amount of data created because of IoT and smartphone devices, it's increased significantly. Then we have real-time systems that allows us to analyze this data. And the university researchers have painstakingly worked on algorithms over the last 30 years around deep learning and regression learning and other technology areas. And that, and a combination of all the other trend, a convergence, it's made it possible for what AI is today. Just a few years ago, all we can do in a game, a computer can only beat a human in a tic-tac-toe game. It dramatically changed today with deep learning techniques, and the world's best Go player was defeated by Google's DeepMind. Just a few months ago, the world's best poker players were defeated by a new AI engine built by Carnegie Mellon University. A dramatic change in a very, very short period. We have not seen this. Even during the evolution of cloud, we have not seen that kind of change. And it's not just happening in gaming. It's happening across industry segments. You look at consumer software, you look at companies like Facebook and Google using AI to match the advertisements to the user preferences. You look at companies such as Google are using AI to dramatically reduce the spend on their data centers. You have companies like Medtronic are using AI, the IBM Watson as an engine, to help predict the health indicators of the patient based on what they will be eating in a particular day. And goes down to companies like NVIDIA and Intel and Qualcomm trying to build this AI computing capability into the chip so that the speed of computing is dramatically increasing. You're starting to see AI play a significant role across industry segments, and just in a very, very short period. And the other big trend is what we call as tech mafias. So tech mafias are Google, Facebook, Amazon, Apple, and Microsoft. These 5 companies, the market cap of these 5 companies is $2.3 trillion. $2.3 trillion. And the market cap of all the top automotive companies is $0.5 trillion. Right? These organizations have dramatically grown. And what is the difference across each of these guys? What they have, unfortunately, they have all of our data. Right? So it's the first thing they have. Second, they have tremendous amount of computing power. And they used it for things like search optimization, building software products. But today, with the combination of machine learning and artificial intelligence algorithms added to the computing power and the data they have, they're able to disrupt multiple industries. They're going after automotive industry. They're going after healthcare industry. They're going after infrastructure. They're building their own AI platforms. not just they're building these AI platforms, they're making these AI platforms open source. Google's TensorFlow already is one of the top products which is used in GitHub. Huge difference, and because of the level of innovation happening, companies across other industries are facing a significant threat. And this has created significant excitement among the VC community across the world. There's been a tenfold increase in VC investments around the AI companies, AI startups. And there are three types of AI startups which are coming in. One are people who are building AI infrastructure. There's a set of companies which are building AI platforms. And third, the set of companies which are building AI applications. If you look at it clearly, the VC funding is largely going into companies which are building AI applications. Because the level of data these tech mafias have access to and the computing power they have, the current thought processes, most of the platform war will be won by these large companies. So the startups will build on top of these platforms. However, there are a few platform AI companies, but the investment on these companies is over $100 million plus. So you really have to put a lot of money to make an AI platform company successful. And you see the investments across each of these three areas. There is already 5 unicorns, which are AI startups. Just in the last 2 years, there are 2 companies which are valued over $1 billion. A dramatic increase in terms of how these companies are getting built. And these are organizations which are ambitious. And every single entrepreneur who are coming out and wanting to start a company today want to start an AI startup. And they're not happy building one application. They're going after every single industry. You have companies which in healthcare industry, which is trying to disrupt the drug discovery process. You have companies in the automotive industry, company like Zoox, which is already valued over $1 billion, trying to disrupt how autonomous cars are built today. So you're starting to see various startups coming across different industries. And companies in these industries don't know what hit them. If you take a large car OEM, they know how to compete with another OEM, which is another $50 billion company. But they don't understand how to even analyze these thousands of startups which are coming and competing with them. Right? That's a big, big challenge. These are commonly used frameworks. Michael Porter's 5 Force model, a Savannah's model by McKinsey. And how many of you use SWOT analysis here? Stop using that. It's not going to help because it will help you analyze one single competition. But the competition you're facing is not from one company. It's from a swarm of startups. So we have thought through this, and we have been working on this for the last year to see how do you understand the disruption which is being created with these swarms of startups. And we are a consulting company, and we like coming up with our own frameworks. And we come up with this model called a swarm disruption model. What it does is we have created a set of lenses to analyze these startups across 5 dimensions. It could be around the value chain, technology, market, consumption, or ecosystem. In value chain, the startups are coming in, they're disaggregating a value chain of an industry and starting to build products in specific micro vertical areas. There are also startups which are aggregating across the value chain and building solutions which is across the value chain. By analyzing the startup, you can also see where the profit pool of an industry is going to move over the next few years. So those are some of the things we can analyze using the value chain lenses. Look at technology lenses. By understanding the kind of technology maturity of the startups, you know where the technology is moving over the next 2 to 3 years. Second, we can look at the lens called technology enabler lens, which will help you understand the tools and infrastructure used by these startups. And that will give you a sense in terms of where you need to invest, what kind of infrastructure you need to build to be able to build products rapidly. And you have lenses which will allow you to see which are the startups which are building a technology which is extensible. So these are some of the key lenses in technology. From a market perspective, so one of the lenses we really like is a marquee customer lens. If there is a bunch of startups in the fintech area using AI, already got customers like JP Morgan, Goldman Sachs, and Wells Fargo, then you really have a challenge because they got the top customers already using the products, and you have a significant disruption coming from these startups. And we have a lens called non-consumption lens. So here, the startups are going after companies which are today not consuming a certain kind of technology, but because of the level of cost and technology the startups are able to build, they're able to use this technology. Very similar to what Clayton Christensen had talked about, the disruptive innovation model. So they start from the bottom, they make the products good enough, and they attack the existing incumbent with a good enough product at a very, very low cost. Then we have consumption pattern, where we analyze the lenses will allow you to look at the customer engagement, how the customers are engaging with a set of startups. Second, look at customer experience, and also look at the level of interfaces provided. Is it voice enabled? Is it mobile? What are the kind of interfaces companies are using, these startups are using to engage their customers? And finally, about ecosystem. And we have this interesting lens called Absorption Lens, which allows us to look at the kind of M&As happening in a particular industry that gives you a view on how your competitors are prioritizing the kind of startup they want to build, as well as on skill sets. So what kind of skill sets are these startups building internally? How is it different from what you have in your own company? So I'll take you through about 6 of these lenses to give you a sense of what's happening in the AI landscape. First, to analyze this, we had to create this exhaustive database. We had to track about 50 different attributes, starting from funding, the skill set, the founder profiles, the technology stack they're building the product, the customer they have, the early customer they have, and things like micro segments, kind of media coverage they have, what kind of awards and recognition these startups have. And we had to collect this for 2,000 plus AI startups. And then we used these 6 lenses. And one of the ideas one of our consultants had is, can I come up with a lens name for each of the Marvel character? We said, no. We'll allow for only one. So we came up with a lens called Deadpool intensity lens. I'll talk a little bit about what that means. So let's start with value chain disaggregation lens. Right here, we took the automotive industry. And you can see that the x-axis shows the kind of micro verticals in automotive, and the y-axis shows the kind of technology, AI technology, which is being used. You can clearly see the autonomous cars, connected infotainment systems, as well as driver safety are some of the key areas where you start to see a significant amount of investment which is going in. There is an interesting startup accelerator in the Bay Area. Just a few months ago, they took about 18 of the startups from here to Stuttgart in Germany. 18 startups. One OEM bought 10 of those startups. Right? Out of the 18 which went to Stuttgart, 10 of them got bought by one OEM in Stuttgart. So that's how much the large OEMs were thinking about, hey, how do I adopt to some of this technology built by these startups? And interestingly, in automotive, it's structured in a tier structure. You have OEMs, you have tier 1 and tier 2. Some of these startups, such as Mobileye, are actually becoming a new tier 1, competing with companies like Harman and Continental and Visteon, who've been around for the last 100 years. A significant threat to existing tier 1 service providers or tier 1 suppliers in automotive. And you look at similar in retail. And retail, you see security, supply chain, multi-channel marketing, customer engagement, in-store analytics. Across these areas, we see startups getting funded. And many of these startups are using more interesting business models. And we here, instead of mapping technology like how we did with automotive, here we map the business model which is used by these startups. To a large extent, affiliate fees is the business model which these startups are working on. And many of the retail companies, they face significant threat from Amazon. For them, hey, how do I partner with some of these very interesting AI startups and use that as a way to defend their existing business against Amazon? And many of them are creating corporate co-innovation labs across the world where they can work with these startups to build very interesting solutions which they can take it to market, which their existing team, even though they're spending billions of dollars, are not able to build. And the third filter we used was to look at some of the large AI platforms, companies like Sentient, which has funded $135 million, and then look at what are the areas are they prioritizing. And very, very interesting. So these platforms, the dominant use cases they are trying to solve is largely in finance, marketing, and healthcare. Healthcare because of the level of unstructured data available and the cost of healthcare being very, very high, and the whole market moving towards patient centricity. AI-based algorithms are allowing people to build very interesting solutions. Second is around marketing, and third is around fintech. So these are three dominant industries where you see some of these large platform AI companies building very interesting solutions. And the fourth aspect we looked at, where are these companies from? Which location are they coming from? Very, very clear, most companies is clearly domination from the US. Like a lot of the AI startups are from here. And there are startups from France and Germany and UK in Europe. And you have in India and China. And you also have startups in Israel. So that's like the landscape of where these startups are coming from. And over $11.5 billion was invested in the US in the startups. And also, we tried to understand what kind of companies are built in each of these locations. In the US, you have companies which are building applications, platform, and infrastructure, all three areas. And you get into Europe, you see a lot of very interesting infrastructure and platform companies, largely because of significant research capability across the universities in Europe, which have been working on AI technologies for the last 20 years. So a lot of this capability is now brought in, and startups are being built in London and in Paris and Munich and Stuttgart and so on. And you come into India and China, you see a lot more startups which are building applications. And these startups are building on top of the platform from IBM, platform from Google, and platform from Microsoft, and building applications which is going to solve local problems in those specific countries using AI technologies. So very interesting in terms of landscape. And you look at, if you're a large company, you're looking at partnership, understanding this landscape is very critical to understand who you need to partner with. The other lens we use is the absorption lens. And here, we want to understand the M&A trend across companies. And especially this tech mafia, the corporate M&A folks, I think they're a spoiled bunch of people. They have a lot of money. I think of them as kids with money in the candy shop. They go around, see, oh, okay, what do I buy? What do I buy? And you see the trend here. You look at the acquisition year, the x-axis. You have the acquisition maturity and the y-axis. In the last 2 years, they're not even letting the companies live for 2 years. The company starts, 18 months, they get acquired. So rapidly, the companies are getting acquired. And now, what it is creating is any new entrepreneurs who are coming into the market, they want to create an AI startup. Because that's who is getting acquired. And what we see, this is going to create a snowball effect where people in the universities want to understand and build AI capabilities. The students are going to get trained in these capabilities when they're coming out of universities. And over the next 2 to 3 years, globally, we are going to have a sufficient talent ecosystem which is very strong in building some of these technologies. And the other trend is a little bit sober one we want to look at is the debt pool intensity. What debt pool means, right? We want to look at startups which are not really done well, which has been funded a lot of money, but they have struggled and they have not really grown. And the reason why it is important to understand is because there are a lot of hype around AI. If you're a large company, you have only so much money you want to focus, and you want to spend that money in a very focused areas. So understanding what is failing in the market is very, very important. And we looked at this, and what we had done is we looked at the scale based on investment, how these companies are growing, and how many years since the company has been created. And using this, we created the Deadpool intensity, and there are 3 key reasons why these companies are failing. One, regulatory restrictions. We have come out at AI, a very interesting startup based out of Bay Area, Mountain View, got funded by Andreessen Horowitz, shut down a few months ago because the government passed regulatory constraints in terms of the level of safety required for autonomous cars. So regulation plays a significant role in some of the failures of these startups. Second, many of them build very interesting technology and it gets adoption, but they have no business model to monetize it. If you're Google or Facebook, you can wait 5 years for monetization. If you're a VC-funded startup, you can't wait long for monetization. So you have a whole bunch of startups failing because they're not able to monetize their products. And third, many of the startups were hammers looking for a nail. They don't have product market fit. So they start the company, they have cool technology. Now they're figuring out what use case will they solve using this technology. And you have a whole bunch of startups failing because of that area. And we are deep down, and we have details on which areas in each of this aspect. So understanding this is going to be very, very critical for companies to be successful. The other aspect we want to understand is how these AI startups are structuring their engineering organization. And how is it different from a traditional organization structuring an engineering organization? We just took 2 companies. We took FireEye. Interestingly, FireEye, for 3 years ago, it's a disruptor. And today, we think of them as an incumbent. Right? And we looked at, mapped their engineering structure. Then we took Darktrace. It's a cybersecurity startup based out of London, heavily funded. You took that company and looked at, hey, what does the engineering organization look like in these 2 companies? How many of you here are from a QA organization? OK, so your jobs are safe. So Darktrace has hardly anybody in QA. How many are from release engineering? OK, good. So we have a good set of people. Again, I think the jobs are legacy jobs. It's not going to be there anymore. So there are certain functions completely disappeared, which has been there in software product engineering for the last 50 years. The next generation of companies don't even have a single role doing that job. This is another key aspect to understand how organizations are changing, how the architecture of the companies are changing, and how fast and how they build their products. And here are some of the areas we think this swarm disruption model will help companies answer questions. If you are a CTO, what are the emerging technology paradigms that as disruptors are leveraging to get ahead? That's a very key question if you're a CTO, because you're looking at 3 years, 5 years down the line. What are the business models which is gaining traction in the industry? That's a very important question. If you're an HR leader, the big question for you is, what is the next generation skills which I should hire for getting my organization ready for the future? And the second question, where will I find them? And if you're a strategy and M&A stakeholder, what are some of the companies which are aligned to the focus areas, what you have? And second, what are some of the gaps in a roadmap over the next 3 years, and what are the companies that can go and hire, acquire, which will fill some of these gaps? If you're a product manager, a lot of time product managers are talking to a bunch of customers, listening to the customer and say, hey, customer wants this feature, comes back to engineering and say, hey, build this feature, because that's what I heard from customer. But instead of that view, can you have a different view and say, where are the startups getting traction? Which are the micro features where the startups are getting traction? Can I use that information to prioritize what product I want to build going forward? How do I optimize the spend on areas where the startups are getting traction? So these are some of the key questions our disruption model will help you answer, which a traditional competitive intelligence framework like SWOT and 7S would not going to help you answer. So hopefully throughout the day, you'll get to know a little bit about how to work with startups, who are the key startups you're working in, and you learn those aspects as you go through this day today. Thank you.